All right, Mr. Ahmed here again. Video number 3 for the week is the properties of kites. Our essential question is to understand what the properties of kites are, what a kite is, and how we can use these properties to find missing parts of it. So, first off, definition of a kite. A kite is a quadrilateral, four-sided figure again, and it has two pairs of consecutive congruent sides. Notice I circle consecutive. Consecutive means they're connected to one another. So in our parallelograms, the opposite sides were congruent. In a kite, the consecutive sides are congruent. So UR is congruent to RS. I put a tick mark there. And UT is congruent to ST. And that is the first thing. That's how we define a kite. Two pairs, consecutive congruent sides. So they're right next to each other. They're connected. The diagonals of a kite are perpendicular. And put our perpendicular symbol in as well. So when I pencil in my diagonal, the distance R to T is our first one, and US is our second one. Since they're perpendicular, they intersect to make a right angle. Again, with our right angles, we'll see we have right triangles. Probably gonna have to use Pythagorean's theorem to find some missing sides. One pair of the opposite angles are congruent. Now, it's a little bit tricky to know which ones are congruent. The pair that's congruent are between the non-congruent sides. So angle U is congruent to angle S. The whole thing. Angle U, angle S. In a similar manner, one diagonal is bisected by the other. Now, it's usually very obvious by looking at the diagram which one that is. It's the shorter one. So US is cut in half. You'll be able to tell just by looking at the picture most often. However, the way you always know, the diagonal that is in between the two non-congruent sides, that's the one that's going to be bisected. And lastly, one diagonal also bisects each of the non-congruent angles. So the non-congruent angles are angle R and angle T. Those are cut in half by diagonal RT. And again, that's pretty obvious when you start looking at the pictures and start kind of seeing these problems, because this right triangle is congruent to this right triangle, and triangle RU, we'll call this V in the middle, would be congruent to RVS. So these two triangles are congruent, and these two triangles are also congruent. And that is the properties of the kite. So we're just going to roll through two quick examples here, and then that'll be it for our last video for this section. So our first example problem. We have a kite, and we are supposed to find the measure of angle JRK. So JRK, let's first identify where JRK is. JRK, angle right in the middle. Since the diagonals of a kite are perpendicular, it would have to be 90 degrees. Our next step says if GR is equal to 3, so G to R, little piece in the middle is 3, and RK is 10, not a very good 10, but we'll work with that. Find JK. So we're looking for JK, this piece X. RK is 10, GR is 3. This is the diagonal that's bisected. Kind of obvious by looking at it again. It's the short one. That means RJ is also 3. To find x, since we have a right triangle, we will use Pythagorean's theorem. X is the hypotenuse, so x squared is equal to 3 squared plus 10 squared. Solving, x squared equals 9 plus 100. X squared equals 109. Take the square root, and we will leave it as x is equal to the square root of 109. If you want to get a decimal, that's fine. So jk is equal to the square root of 109, and we are done. And finally, last part of this example asks us to find a missing angle. So we have one part left. So we are told angle GHJ up at the top, that's 90 degrees. So I'm going to mark that with a box, make it 90. Doesn't quite look like it's 90, but that's okay. And angle HGK, this entire angle here, HGK, is 110 degrees. We're supposed to find angle GKJ down at the bottom, GKJ. This entire angle, we will call that Y. So, 4 angles of a kite. It's still a quadrilateral, so all of the angles have to add up to 360 degrees. We know that this angle on the left, angle G is 110. That means angle J is also 110. So 110 plus 110 plus our angle up at the top was 90. Plus our angle at the bottom, that's what we're looking for, Y. That has to equal 360 degrees. When we solve, Y is 50. And we would then state the measure of angle GKJ equals 50 degrees. And our problem is solved. We are completed. I have one more example. This one's a little bit easier than the last one, just one part. It says to find angle B and angle D. So I have a kite. The consecutive sides are marked as congruent. That means this one's 36, 70. Those two angles are not congruent. Therefore, the other two opposite angles have to be. We will call that X and X. All 4 angles again add up to 360. So X plus 70 plus 36 equals 360. And then we will solve. And when you solve, X is equal to 127 degrees. So at this stage, that wraps up our kites. You'll complete your assignment on your Clever Big Ideas tab. And then we will be having a quiz here coming up in the near future on all of our quadrilaterals, parallelograms, squares, rectangles, rhombuses, kites, and trapezoids. Have a great rest of the day. Signing off.